Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com. Hello everyone and welcome back to a new episode of Mythic Cast. I'm your host Spencer and I'm joined by my co-host, Mythic Mikelea. How's it going, Mikelea?
Hey everyone. It's going well.
So I want to be clear that when we came back we said we're going to go every other week, and then I made us skip a week. I've been really busy, and I just want to apologize to listeners. It wasn't just this. I don't want to everybody think, oh, Spencer will just cut Mythic Cast whenever he's busy. It wasn't just this. I canceled a lot of things. Additionally, we had to move the podcast this week because my wife's a kindergarten teacher and parent-teacher conference happened. So you're getting it a little late, but I wanted to make sure we did it. But I just want to apologize. I've been really busy in my career right now, and as well as just kind of some other stuff that came up, but just wanted to kind of quickly apologize. But you know what we don't have to apologize for is our sponsor over at puremtgo.com. I have been using Pure MTGO a lot lately, Mikelea, because me and my two best friends, Quinn Pierce and Matt Kling, have started to play challenges again on MTGO to make some dollar bills, and they are absolutely insane if you're trying to buy cards on Magic Online. What's even funnier is my friend Quinn didn't know about them. He was going to the bots and looking for cards that they didn't have, and my friend Matt was like, Quinn, if you do this for 2 more minutes, I'm gonna lose my mind. I need you to go to MTGO Traders and just buy the cards. He's like, what do you mean? And he showed him how to do it. He's like, oh my gosh, this is mind blowing. So if you are interested, check it out. Super awesome.
Technology has come a long way since 2010.
It really has. If you want to support the show directly, head on over to patreon.com/MythicCast, and we would love to see it. I have wristbands to get sent out again. We'll also be giving those. If you see Mikelea or I at an event, we might have some on us. So just politely ask us, and we might have them for you. So. Really quick before we move on, Mythic guests. We do want Mythic guests on the show. I know that it's a little bit harder for us to get them right now because we took so long off, and people aren't tweeting us their Mythic deck lists right now. But if you are getting Mythic, whether it's Alchemy or Historic or even Limited, we'd love some Limited Mythic guests. We've only had, I think, 2 on the show at this point. Whatever you're getting Mythic with, let us know. We want to talk to you about it. And yeah. So, Mikelea, today we're going to talk about Historic after the Dynasty Championship. And we're not talking about Alchemy because Alchemy cards got released. We're going to talk about the Alchemy cards got released, but we're the main topic today is going to be Historic. And I'm excited and also scared that people are going to be mad at our I think people might be upset that we're a little disinterested in arena-only formats right now.
But, Magic's something, it has something for everyone, right?
Yeah, it does.
Not everyone's obligated to enjoy the same type of
things.
True. So just, maybe because we aren't feeling something right now doesn't mean that it's not good.
Well, let's go into Ready for Battle. Hashtag Ready for Battle is... what this show's about, right? We're trying to get you ready to grind the ladder and play the events that you want to play. Whether it's, I know that they have the first Alchemy format challenges coming up. I know that a lot of our listeners have been grinding this limited set because it's freaking great. So, if you're trying to get ready for battle, we want to hear about it. You can tweet at us. I don't think we had any tweets this week, but use the hashtag Ready for Battle and we'll read those tweets on the show. But I'll go first this week. For this show, I actually went in and found some really cool technology both from the Pro Tour and some from or the Championship and from some other events to update Gruul aggro. And I've been playing mostly like other variants of Gruul. I did a deck tech on Legends Gruul and stuff like that. But one of the things that has come up in this new Fangle Dangle historic format is there's like a lot of life gain triggers happening and like a lot of creatures entering the battlefield. And one of the cool innovations is people are back to playing Rampaging Ferocitodon. So I got to change up my deck list, include those in there. Also, change the deck to include a lot of like different lands because there's so many good lands now in historic and things like that. So I kind of worked on Gruul this week. In preparation for this podcast, as well as like playing into other stuff. Also finally crafted Green Black Food, which is a deck I'm super interested in. And it was a lot of fun. Like I went undefeated today with Gruul, for example. I think that there are a lot of good decks in Historic and also some really cool innovations happening. But that's kind of what I did for this podcast. I was really focused on Modern this week because I had a Modern 1K plus. That means that it has scaling prizes. It turned into a 3K. So I mostly have been focused on Modern, but I did want to make sure to get some Historic in. What about you, Mikelea?
Yeah, so for the Historic part of my week, I actually queued up some auras on Arena to get a little bit better feel for the format. Remembered why I don't like playing auras. We can get into that later.
Did you play the black-white one or the blue-white one?
The blue-white one.
Okay.
It was, but after maybe I wasn't having the best experience with that, I jumped in and watched some videos from the Pro Tour or the Championship, and just to get a better feel for the format and watch how some of the best players are playing these decks. And that's always one of my favorite things to do when I'm preparing. You can learn so much in a short period of time.
Keep going.
Go ahead.
No, keep going.
Oh, I was going to hop into Standard, so if you had something to add.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really love that you do that. And I've been trying to do it more. It's something that I do a lot in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which is like last weekend, for example, on Sunday, I just watched Smash coverage after the Modern Challenge. I watched Smash coverage and like worked on some stuff, and I found myself and watched the Pro Tour too, the Championship too. But I found myself really engaging with the Championship in like kind of a new light. Like I have not played a lot of Historic and Alchemy recently. I've mostly focused on Standard and stuff like that. So for me, it was like actually really good coverage, and I'm kind of sad it didn't get as many viewers this time, because I actually think that the coverage team did a great job of like explaining the decks, explaining the metagame. And if you like, we are actually not gonna do as good as a job as they did for this event, and I would encourage people to do what Mikelea did and watch, because it is actually quite good coverage.
Yeah, and especially if there's one of these decks that you want to try out and you want to take on ladder or to tournament. I know there's a lot of melee tournaments that maybe Historic's one of them. It's a great first step to take. It can give you a lot of insight without having to make those mistakes early or playing the deck. Second thing for the week, I'm in VML, so I have to focus on Standard every single week. So pick the deck list. I've really liked this Orzhov mid-range deck that I've been playing quite a bit. So stuck with that. My opponent registered the Runes deck, but with Showdown of the Skald. I got a little hurt on ladder by people drawing 3 of those into like the top 20 cards, and got extremely nervous about my matchup this week. Practice some. Kind of got a feel for, okay, this is how I lose, this is how I win. Played my match. I did win, but I did learn how I lose that matchup.
Yeah, it's funny. Over on the other show that I do on the network, Constructor Criticism, we got to talk about runes a little bit, and the deck is really strong, and its good draws are really good, but I think that people are really used to a best deck being figured out and then feeling they don't have to do anything. But I think this standard format, and I think just from what you just said, right, it's still pretty open. Like even like I don't know. I think there's a lot of 45-55s instead of a lot of like 60-40s in this format.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think the key to your win was, other than them not having 3 showdowns in the top 20?
I drew my spot removal and and a little bit of hand disruption. Game, like I could have the Meat Hook Massacre or a Farewell, and I was just finding those weren't necessarily doing enough, because usually I had a creature to come back with. But that spot removal is really letting me hone in on that very specific, like, all-in creature, while also putting my own pressure on the board and not just clearing it away. I
Nice.
still needed those big effects as backup, I guess, or just
Sure.
depending on how the game was going. But I was finding it very important that I drew my spot removal, and
Awesome.
sometimes you have a lot of spot removal, and sometimes you just don't draw it.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Let's talk about arena news really quick. We're not going to dive into the news. I'm going to get about like a high level look at it, and then I encourage people. I'll put these links in the show notes. They're all from Wizards, but we have new cards coming to Alchemy right after the event, which is one of the reasons we didn't talk about Alchemy, is because there's an entire new mechanic and there's entire new cards. And it was interesting to kind of hear, how do I say this? It was interesting to hear from Wizards kind of what their thoughts were on where Alchemy's at and what it's offering. And these cards got previewed during the event and the week after. And I think for me, Mikelea, like, I still haven't figured out like why I should engage with Alchemy. But yeah, I'm curious your thoughts. Like, I definitely played against some of these cards in Historic today. For example, I'll just read one of them really quick. 1 in a black, Undercity Plunder is a sorcery. Target opponent discards a card, then they may discard an additional card. If they don't, duplicate a random card from their library and put it in your hand. It perpetually gains. You can use any mana of any color to cast this spell. So basically, it's 2 mana Mind Rot, or you discard a card, I get a card from your deck. That's a really powerful card. My opponent today in Historic was playing almost all. Almost all their cards were arena only. So I'm kind of curious, like, how you're feeling about these releases, how they impact your thoughts on Historic as a whole, and also your thoughts on Alchemy.
So I'm just generally someone who does not really enjoy that Eternal format. I don't like the big card pools, and I really like having that smaller pool to focus on and like just really learn the interactions and what the format's trying to do, and that narrower like scope of synergies that you'll have in something like Standard. However, I see these cards coming out, and I think the designs of them are really cool, and it really enables them to do a lot of cool things with design and venture out into areas that Magic really couldn't before. So I do appreciate that. It's kind of like, I would like to play these cards, but then I have to also get myself maybe into more of a format that I don't enjoy as much.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because like, even with what you just said, you'd think, oh, well, why doesn't Mikelea play Alchemy? And it's like, well, I'm spreading myself pretty thin when I have to remember what a card does in Alchemy versus Standard, plus the format's different, plus it's just a lot. I don't know.
And yeah, I guess going into that, maybe part of the reason I don't enjoy Eternal formats so much is I think a lot of times you end up with more like an archetype that you really lean towards, or like your favorite type of deck that you're always just going to try to figure out how to make it work in the meta, versus I just kind of like going out and like learning like what's well positioned, what's strong right now, rather than kind of sticking with that similar archetype. Given I do gravitate towards more mid-range kind of combo decks, but I'm not that stuck
Sure.
on one.
And I also think, like, you know, I think that it's totally okay, like what you said earlier, to do the things that you love in Magic, and there's like a lot of ways to consume Magic right now. So that's kind of the arena news as far as the new cards. I would encourage people to check out the new cards if you're interested in Alchemy and Historic. They're already seeing play, like it's already impacting the formats. Really quickly, before we move on, there is going to be more updates to the arena economy. The biggest one that they had mentioned this week in their thing was there's a couple things. So with the release of the next set, you will be able to buy, I think it's 20 wild cards for $50, I believe is basically where they landed. In addition to that, they're still not interested in dusting, and they kind of talked about the kind of talked about like the vision overall. And I encourage people to watch it. It gives you a look into maybe where Arena's heading, and they do want feedback. I know that if you read Twitter, you'd think that they don't, but that's not what they're saying. I don't think that a feature to introduce a number of wild cards into your account for too much money. Like, I'll say my opinion, like they literally, I think, said that they wanted standard decks to cost $200. And like, to me, maybe it's 15 wild cards. I'm thinking about it or something. But anyway, I do think that's too much. Like, I think they're charging too much. But the only reason they're even introducing the feature is because we told them we had a problem. So continue to give them feedback.
Absolutely.
I mean, Mikelea doesn't have this problem. She's like a Mythic drafter. So like, she's like, first of all, what's a wild card? I just click a button that says craft, and then my deck exists. And also, I just have 3,000 Mythics on my account because I just draft.
So I probably did less than 10 drafts of every set that came out in 2021.
Ooh.
I've been broke from the last couple seasons of VML.
There you go. There you go.
Broke. And then actually I had a decent amount of gold still though. And then I played 2 arena opens and just got not good sealed rules. So I don't know. We're poor. We're back to being poor over here.
Oh man. I'm a little surprised. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, of the two of us, I expected you to be the arena rich.
I used to be. But nah,
That's funny.
It's easy. So I guess I took a lot of time off of that,
it's true,
grinding the free to play aspect of it. So, I can see that perspective of oh, hey, I was just rolling in the dough on arena and having no issues with the economy whatsoever from my perspective. But now I'm seeing oh yeah, I'm kind of.
For me, I buy the package every set. And the reason I do it is to me it's like buying a box on Arena. It's like, okay, well, I would spend this money on a box, and if you don't have the funds to do that, I'm not saying this is how you should do it, but to me it's like, okay, I'm gonna get a box of cards, I'm gonna get 2 free drafts and it's free sealed. Those I hopefully can turn into about 10 drafts. So for me, that's what I spend on Arena. And I do think it's too much. I think I spend too much on Arena, but it makes it really easy for me to build whatever I want and play sealed and limit and draft and standard and historic. So I don't know.
I guess I've dabbled in Hearthstone before, and I end up getting frustrated because I never felt like I could ever make the absolute top tier decks as a free to play player.
That's definitely true.
And I end up having to put money into it just to be able to play a tournament because you have to have 3 top tier decks for that. And I was having a lot of issues where something I would be playing would get banned, and sure, you can get some of those wild cards back. So to me, I think the Magic economy is probably slightly worse than Hearthstone, but my experience, I also had to throw money at that to be competitive too. And I think maybe there's just a little bit different mentality though around the two games, especially because Magic, you're also investing money in paper, or Magic Online as well if you're playing that.
Yeah, I totally understand people's frustrations. Like, I wanted to quickly look because I was pretty sure that this was true, and like it is true that like mono white aggro, a deck that typically you would think would be super inexpensive, something that back in mine and Michaela's days was probably like an $80 standard deck. It's $200 on tabletop, almost $300 on MTGO, and has 42 rares and 3 mythics, at least in the list that did this cash event that I'm pulling up. So I get it. Magic got really expensive, and I totally understand the frustrations, and I would encourage you to voice those frustrations. Let's go on to Historic, though, because that is what this week's episode is about. We got to take a look at the meta game from the championship, and I'll just kind of go over it really quickly, Mikelea, and then we can go in. Is it Phoenix pretty disproportionately had 24.5% was 24.5% of the field. They separated out, I believe, Azores control into the Yorion ones and the non-Yorion ones. If you combined them, it makes a lot more sense, coming in at almost exactly 15% of the field. Then you have Golgari Food at almost 9%, Azores Auras at almost 7%, Jeskai Control at almost 7%, and then Lotus Field at almost 6%, tied with Rakdos Arcanist. Honestly, like, I was surprised, but I guess I didn't put these in the show notes, so we should probably talk about our thoughts on the metagame. I don't know how much you've engaged with this format, but like, I was shooketh seeing the numbers.
I guess so. Obviously, not a format that I engage with a ton, but from what I knew, I guess I wasn't really shocked to see the food deck being up there in the top percentages. Maybe control seemed high, but I think that's something where you can always talk about going into a pro tour level tournament, right? You're probably going to have a higher number of control decks than you would have in a non-pro tour level field. But
yeah, to me, like, if you asked me going to this event, like, I played a lot of Historic with Matt, not this month, but like the month before. So it's possible the new set changed the format a lot, but I don't think, like, Is It Phoenix got that many cards, and I also don't think that, like, personally, and leave a comment, you just leave that YouTube hate comment right here, just let me know if I'm, like, how stupid I am, but, like, I don't think Phoenix is the best deck. And so for me to see it be that high of a percentage is like, okay, did you just pick, like, this deck is just good, get some number of free wins because I need to focus on Alchemy because I just never play it? Like, is that what happened? I just don't understand how we get to this number. And then to me, the top decks were, like, I think I said this on CC, but, like, I think Golgari Food / Jund is, like, the top, like, probably the best deck in my opinion. I would say Phoenix is probably top tier in, like, that S tier category, and then honestly, like, auras of some kind is really high up there, and then to me it's like the control decks and Gruul are next, and then everything else I don't even know. Like,
so I do want to point out something interesting about this. This metagame kind of looks like what Historic has looked like for a long time. And I know these decks are all playing, a lot of them are playing newer cards, but this...
It's like a Phoenix deck, a food deck, a control deck, an RS deck, and a Gruul decks. Like, it's...
Yeah, like you could have picked this up like a year ago and seen these
It's true. I think that the big difference is, like, the field deck got better, and the blue-green, like, since Oro has been banned, I think is what we're saying, right? Like, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It is. I think that that is true. What is weird is the percentages. Like, having a deck that is clearly not, like, above and beyond the best deck apply so much of that. And we can talk about that really quick. I don't know if you got the chance to look at the data, but I will link the tweet where some of that data got posted. But I'll go first. Like, what did I think of the results? I was shocked by the food results, to be completely honest. Golgari food had, some pretty interesting splits against our. I mean, also, we'll get into this later, but like, there was such a lack of meaningful data from this event because Phoenix occupied such a large portion of the field. And because of that, like, you look at the data and you're like, oh my gosh, Golgari food only has a 25% win percentage against ours, and you're like, oh, there was a total of 4 matches only of that matchup? That's wild for 2 of the best decks. Then you see the same thing against Orzhov ours, right? And it's like 33%. Oh, there's only 3 matches. You're telling me that only 7 matches total were played between Golgari food and Aura's decks? Like,
so something I want to bring up here that I'm actually like really interested if anybody ever like looks into this like deeper, but Alchemy was the first part of the day, and then it switched to Historic.
I should know the answer to this, and I don't.
I believe that it was.
And then the top 8 was Alchemy again.
Yeah, so you're undefeated. Like, obviously, people on the like teams are going to be playing the same deck usually. So if you had like an undefeated Alchemy deck, those were probably undefeated going into the Historic rounds, and thus I think you're getting like some weird pairings there too, where maybe the data that you're getting from this is not as representative of.
Yeah, it's interesting because like there are clearly things that we can see that are true for what it's worth, right? Mm-hmm. So like, for example, there's 28 matches between Golgari food and Phoenix, and Golgari food won 57.1 of them. This is the reason that I was so shocked that so many people brought Phoenix, though, right? It's like,
knowing the uptick in food right now.
Like, I already think food is the best deck. It doesn't have a good food matchup. Like, the results make sense in some ways, but also like there's so little to learn from it. I don't know. It's kind of upsetting.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I think a lot of the ways that you can target food, you can also target the Phoenix deck. So, yeah, it is very interesting, but I can see a lot of those players. Phoenix has been around for a long time. It's been around in a couple different formats. So if people were looking for something safe to play, then
yeah.
As far as I mean, these are all Pro Tour level players. Like, I believe they can play any deck out there, but if you're just like looking for something that is in a comfort zone, then that would make a lot of sense.
The other decks that I'll cover really quickly that I was kind of looking at the data on, Rakdos Arcanist. When I first looked at the data, I was like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of green for a deck that I think is really, really bad. And then I like read further and was like, oh, wait a second. It only played 3 matches against food somehow. And barely got 6, like barely won 2 of them. So like that's not meaningful data. Lost against the best deck in the most played deck in the room. Like, and then also like clearly has terrible field matchup. Like, you know, that you already weren't going to win that. So at first I was like, this is shocking. Then I looked at the numbers. I was like, oh, this deck was like not played a lot because it's not good, and then it also might have overperformed, so maybe it's better than I think, but also doesn't have a good Phoenix matchup, and I'm not convinced it has a good food matchup. I don't know.
It's good for Soros?
Yeah, that does seem true. That, for what it's worth, I do think that is probably likely. Like, it went 7-0, or wait, yeah, 4-0, I guess. Man, so little numbers. This is wild. This data, that was my main takeaway. I think we're on the same page. Like, there wasn't a lot to take off. Let's talk about ladder, though, after this event. It's funny you mentioned kind of how like this format sometimes feels like modern. I think for me, I don't know that this event will impact the ladder at all. In fact, I would say from my playing over the last couple of days to prepare for this podcast, that it 0% affected the ladder from my experience so far. I just think that like people are more likely to build a deck that they want to play in Historic and have like 2 to 3 Historic decks built and just figure out how to make those decks work, and that's it.
Yeah, I think maybe like people are going to pay attention to what's popular in like these tournaments, because that's going to go into how you build your sideboards. It's going to go into how you construct your deck. But yeah, exactly. I don't expect a lot of people to, gravitate from their comfort deck too often. So, and then also, so Historic, you have your best of 1 queues and your best of 3 queues, and they are best of 1 is its own game out there.
It's true. And the number of times I'll just say this on the podcast, since the UI update. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you have this problem, Mikelea, but like when you click on to play Constructed, it automatically queues you into best of 1 non-ladder. And so, like, what usually happens for me now, I finally got used to clicking out of non-ladder. But what will happen is I'll click the ladder, and then I'll queue into best of 1 ladder. So, anyway, it's so frustrating. What a terrible... Why did they change? I don't understand. What was wrong with the menu of the things? Like, we have too many things, so we're going to make this easier. No, you didn't do that. You didn't make it easier. You actually gave me more clicks. The thing you're not supposed to do when making software, and you did it. Anyway. Guys, I'm
also not a fan, but...
I tweeted this. I deleted the tweet, but, like, I was the biggest believer in Arena, and I still am. Like, I still believe that they could make Arena the future of Magic. And it's frustrating when they do stuff like this, because it's like... Oh, actually, we have to rewind, though, because they did listen to Spencer Howland, where I made a tweet that, like, got retweeted by, like, multiple 10,000 plus accounts, where it's like, I will not buy another set of basic lands until you let me set a default basic land for each land type. And during the economy, they said that feature's coming. So, y'all are welcome. Anyway, and that's true. They got my money. Anyway. I want to talk about ladder, though, because you make a really good point. The formats are different, but also what's even more interesting is, like, while the individual performances of decks or the... Like, I'll use Jeskai Control as an example, because Jeskai Control did not do well at this event. Like, it actually did really bad. However, I think Jeskai Control is still going to see a lot of play on ladder. So what's going to happen is people are going to homogenize and take the things that they liked from these decks and try to make their Jeskai deck better. Additionally, they're going to try and attack the decks that did well instead that they did poorly against, right? So it impacts the ladder and, like, how decks are constructed, but I don't think it impacts, like, the metagame share of decks, if that makes sense.
I think that makes sense. I also like a deck like Jeskai Control in a closed deck list environment like ladder is versus open deck list like your championship was.
Because there's 1,000 different ways to build it between what is the Mythic versions. Anyway, you say what you were gonna say.
Yeah, it leaves a lot more questions for your opponent in that closed deck list environment. Maybe they're going to play around something that you don't have. Maybe they're going to choose not to play around something that you do end up having. And there's just like those little incremental advantages that can be gained that way.
Yeah, that's totally fair. What are some... The next question I have on our show notes is, what is something that someone should know grinding for Mythic and Historic the week after this event? I kind of already said my first thought, but after playing the last 2 days, I have a second thought. But I think the results of this event are misleading. I think that, I mean, you see a number 66, right? And you're like, oh man, that's a really good win percentage. And like, there's 3 results on this, right? You see 75, there's 4 results. Like, the only thing that I learned is like going three different matches going 3-0 in Rakdos versus Auras and Rakdos, or 4-0, I guess. Like, that's a real result. Like 100% in a matchup across 4 matches at the Pro Tour. I'm starting to believe, right? But like, I'd like to get to like 15, 100, 1,000 matches. So, I would say that people who were talking really in depth about these results, kind of like I'm doing on the show, I think that it's important to like take a step back, realize that a lot is going on. Matchups also are getting weird because it's a multi-format event. I don't know. The second thing that I will say is that I think that a lot of decks were not represented at this event. There's a lot of really good decks in Historic that, I mean, if we just go to Goldfish, I'll pull it up really quickly, but like the number of times where like, actually, I'll just use this as an example. One of the most played freaking decks in Historic, even though I believe it is literally is it literally unplayable? It is probably unplayable. Is 5-color Niv. Like, I don't think the deck is good, but you know what? A lot of people want to play, just love the idea of playing 5-color, and you're gonna run into it on ladder. So because of that, I don't know that like. Oh, and another deck that is extremely good that I don't even know we mentioned yet is Heliod Company. Like, I don't even know. There was one Heliod Company deck at the freaking event.
Yeah, there was more Niv Mizzet decks.
Like, that deck is actually really good. I think that, like, if I was going to give you advice, it would be, don't look at this meta game. Learn from the deck lists, right? Like, also, if you can dig into like this person played this, and then see if you can see an interview from them or watch them play their deck. That's the thing that you learn from this event. Don't just use the raw data because it's short and it's imprecise, like in a lot of ways.
It's not representative of the of ladder.
It's true. It really isn't. And like, I think Heliod Company might be like the best example of this. There's one Heliod Company deck, and I obviously like it's only 2.1% metagame share of like the decks on Goldfish, but I mean it's like 20th on the list on this championship. So, what about you? Any advice you would give somebody playing ladder?
Based on this paper, I really hope people have been prepared for the graveyard in Historic and interacting with that, but
I've been saying for months that I think Klothys is the best card in Historic. Like, and that's just not like the guy that loves Gruul. Like, legitimately, it's good in every matchup. Like, what matchup do you not want it in? And I think that's
going a little far. Like, it does something in every matchup.
That's fair. I mean, it's not like you want 4 of them. You know what? Let me have my hyperbole. No, I really do think that like your point is really valid, and it's also really interesting to see like the graveyard hate people picked. I'll give a really good example of this. When I was looking at deck lists preparing for this podcast, oh man, I'm not gonna remember the name of this card.
So with a card like Klothys, like back when I played this in Standard, it was a lot of, yes, this card does something in every matchup, but sometimes you did sideboard it out because you just have cards in your sideboard that were doing more of your plan and giving you better advantage than this card's existing and doing something, but maybe not the best thing I could be doing here.
Yeah, I think That's interesting. I think that because Historic has Burning Tree Emissary and lots of pips, the card gets a lot better. But I do agree with what you're saying. Like, I'm never gonna play 4 of that card, right? Because like they're never gonna kill the first one. Like, and if they do, I don't. It's not like I would need 3 more. If that makes sense. So I definitely understand that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to add that too. So I know when it comes to like sideboarding and all that, like sometimes you just get really caught up on like, well, this card isn't bad as a matchup, but is it really doing enough?
Yeah. Um. I think for what it's worth, that one of the points that you made, kind of about like, are you packing Graveyard Hate? And it's funny, right? Because like, we talk about this a lot on constructive criticism over the years, but it's probably time to talk about it on this podcast. That in weeks where people are not doing that, right? It makes it so graveyard decks become better. And like you're either gonna pay the graveyard tax, or you're not, right? Like you're either gonna do it or you're gonna lose. And so, for me, it becomes about, okay, how many graveyard cards do I want? And like, for example, the list I was playing today had, in the 75, had 3 Ooze, 2 Clothis, 2 Pillar of Flames, and 2 Soul Guide Lantern. Is that the name of that card? Like,
yeah, that sounds right.
I think that if you're not willing to pay that tax, you're gonna end up being sad sometimes. One of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this, though, is there's a new card. I could not find the name, even though I made the tangent happen. Like, there's a new card that is 1 red. Oh, I did find the name of it. It's called Flame Blast Bolt. It's 1 red. For an instant, deals 2 damage to a creature or planeswalker. If it would die, you exile it instead, right? So I have a really big thought on this that I needed to say on this podcast. If you are playing an aggro deck, like Gruul Aggro, I understand that this is the hot tech. I understand that it's an instant. Like, you should play this over Magma Spray, but you should never play this over Pillar of Flame. Like, ever. Like, I get it. I get people want to be cute. And I had a long conversation with one of my best friends about this, Mikelea. And I want you to literally tell us if we're wrong here. But we're going to use Gruul Aggro because that's the deck we're talking about. So we're like, okay, well, what matchups do I want this for? Okay, do you want cheaper removal against things like do you want something to kill Phoenix? It's like, if you're dying to this Phoenix, right? Like, you can take a hit from a Phoenix and then still exile it and probably be okay. So that one's kind of out of the question. Like, it's possible that like they get a 4 Phoenix turn, but like, I don't know that one Flame Blessed Bolt's gonna save you there. At least in a lot of spots, because you still have 3 more Phoenixes, right? The other spots, right, are like, okay, well, what are the other creatures that I want to deal with quickly, and that I want 1 mana removal spells for? And the things that we came up with are from the aura side. Like, I want to be able to kill the O2. Oh my gosh, how did I forget this card's name? I just said its name earlier. I have a broken brain when it comes to this podcast. It's the spirit, the core Spirit Dancer. Woo! Got there. Yeah, like, so one of the things we brought up was core Spirit Dancer, and the other one we brought up was Sprite Dragon. And it's like, okay, well, let's talk about that. If I leave 1 mana up, are you going to play something into my 1 mana removal spell on your core Spirit Dancer or your Sprite Dragon? No. You're way more likely to just tap out on turn 2 and play one of those cards, in which case Pillar of Flame already kills it. So, thus, I should just play Pillar of Flame so that I can hit you in the face. What are your thoughts?
I think that sounds like sound logic. I'm not an aggro player at heart, so but no, it makes sense where you're going to want that flexibility and what you can target.
I'm not saying to do this for like if you need 1 mana removal that hits things.
Yeah, you're not going to put this in your control deck.
Right, exactly. But like the number of cruel aggro decks that have been playing this card, like I also played Magger Spray for a hot minute, and like I was like, okay, well, why am I doing this? And I thought about it, and there were a couple of reasons. But the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what, these should just be pillars. So to see people switching back to the better Magma Spray was a little weird for me. I was like, I already wanted to hit Planeswalkers, which is why I switched back to Pillar. And they're like, oh, well, this one hits Planeswalkers now. I was like, yeah, so I get that it's a better Magma Spray. Anyway, that's a tangent that was not in the show notes, but I really wanted to discuss it because, one, I value Michaela's opinion, and I just wanted her approval. But two, I think that it goes to show that the format is interesting, and like Mikelea, you talked about like the things you don't like about Modern, but the things that I do love about Modern, I think are true of Historic. Like when Modern changes and the format changes, Modern's really fun for like the exploratory aspect, right? So for me, when a new set comes out, I really enjoy Historic. When I don't enjoy it is like at the end of a format. I'm like, Historic is like unbelievably boring. Everybody's just playing their pet deck. There's no way to metagame because like there's 32 decks. So anyway, those are kind of my thoughts on. If I'm gonna give you a tip, it's don't be too cute. Like you don't have to play the better Magma Spray in your aggro deck when you can play Pillar of Flame. You don't have to play the newest counterspell if the other counterspell is better. You don't have to like do this cute thing to get wins. Just do the thing that your deck wants, and you're gonna have better results.
You can try the cute new card.
Yes.
You can try it. But yeah, like ask the questions: is this doing what my deck needs it to do, or am I losing something by playing this cute new card over the old one?
For what it's worth, Mikelea, you love mid-range decks, right? But you didn't suddenly think, you know what I want to do is I want to play 5-color Niv, because like
I never thought that in my life. Okay.
I have in Modern when I'm gonna get scape shifts.
No, normally my meltdowns are not I'm gonna go play 5-color Niv. It's I'm gonna go play Grixis.
Yeah, I had that meltdown too. That's a bad meltdown. I had that meltdown a lot. I'm like, you know what though? What if this fixes Grixis? I have that problem too. I'm a blue.
I definitely almost registered Grixis for Mythic Championship.
Ooh. You know what though?
That was a phase we went through in that process.
So for Pro Tour, was it Pro Tour Origins? Somebody had to talk me off. Well, I don't know if they talked me off the ledge. I wanted to play blue-black control with. Do you remember the land that like you could put counters on it to make colorless mana? It's like a Soul Ring or something. Anyway, you could like put charge counters on it. You could empty it, and it would make colorless mana, right? Mm-hmm. So I had a deck that from our testing team that was blue-black control Ugin deck that had that card, and people were like, Spencer, this is like way out of field. Like nobody else is doing this. It was like easily it was the first or second best deck in our playtesting. Our first best deck was like it was green red devotion, which was like it had 3 in the top 8 of that Pro Tour. I played it at that Pro Tour. I day 2 that Pro Tour. It was a good deck. I wanted to play this blue black deck. Everybody told me I should not, so I was like, you know what? I have a team full of people that are all telling me how to play this. Freaking Huey Jensen and Reed Duke played it at Worlds the next tournament, and both top 8'd. So, Michaela's right. You can try the Q stuff, and if the Q stuff works, do it. Just don't lie to yourself about it. Like, just be honest. Like, a really good example of this, for what it's worth, for me, is like, does my deck want Censor, or does it want just Sawari Disruption? Like, and be honest with yourself. Like, you probably have a preference. Do you want the land, or do you want the cycling? That's okay. You can have a preference. But which one does my deck want? And which one makes my deck better? I think is a really important question.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you play moving forward, Mikelea? Like you have a for some reason, there's a $1 million historic tournament tomorrow, and you get a special invite. You're just invited. What are you playing? It's invite only.
I'm giving up on life and playing goblins.
Wow, that's a bad choice. Are you really? Are you really? Is it because you played it?
Probably the historic deck that I could like pilot the best at this point. Like,
that's fair.
A deck that I could just like pick up and like play remotely decently versus everything. It's probably goblins.
I'm a little surprised by that answer. I thought for sure you were gonna play like say gruel food.
I'm not a food deck person.
Fair. I'm not saying you're wrong for the deck you picked. I was just surprised to hear it. I would play Gruul aggro, which makes me sad because like I've worked so hard on like different ramp decks, different like it sounds like such a boring answer, but like if we're in the spot where like I need to play the best deck for me moving forward, it like I've done deck techs on Gruul Legends. I've done deck techs on, which by the way you should watch that deck tech. The deck is hot. I've done a deck tech on Gruul Elementals. I've done like I've tried a lot of things in that space. Additionally, like I think I did a deck tech on Jeskai, on Blue White. I would be down to two things. I would either play just straight up Gruul aggro, or I would play Jund food like with Kobold. I think this format is it is like Modern, and so you have to kind of treat it like Modern in a lot of ways. So for me, like I either want to be asking a question with really strong sideboard cards, which is why I would lean towards Gruul aggro, or I want to kind of have like an overwhelming game plan or just a combo finish. And I don't think the combo decks are very good in this format. We didn't really talk about the Lotus decks very much, but like I just think that the combo decks are both not good and that Arena does not lend themselves to good combo decks. So thus, I'm probably going to play one of those.
I want to change my answer, by the way.
Oh, go for it.
I'd probably play that Azores Affinity deck, honestly.
Oh, I think that's hot.
Yeah, honestly, I think that deck was very interesting and like something I could like.
Why don't you talk about that for listeners really quick? What is this deck?
Okay, so it was undefeated after day one, I believe. So it plays like 4 Esper Sentinel, and
I knew you were gonna like this deck.
I'm not gonna be able to explain this deck really well.
You're looking at the list and you're like, I'm gonna load this up, right?
Yeah. 1 second.
So for what it's worth, like while you're pulling stuff up, I do think that Historic has the same problem of Modern, where like there's sometimes like a lack of innovation, and when you have those moments where you get ahead of something, it becomes really powerful. You know, I think that the blue card in this deck that kind of made it pop off, it's the, I don't know the name of the card, and it's gonna sound bad on the podcast, but like it's the one that bounces or is like a Springleaf Drum. Like that card is really good, and there's a lot of things in modern. See, we're already doing it in Historic that you can do with that, and it's like exploring those things, right? Those cute things. That's what we were talking about earlier in the show.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, the Azores Affinity deck. It's it's playing your small artifact creatures, right? But you got like this. This is a deck that fits Soul Guide Lantern in it great because adds to the affinity count and helps with that graveyard. So it plays a Shadow Spear, which is kind of how that it can really just like pull ahead of some some of the decks. So the match I watched was against Phoenix, which was really interesting because the Sentinels put a huge tax on Phoenix. So Esper Sentinels, when an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X for X is Esper Sentinel's power. I believe we talked about this on a podcast.
We did. I was literally looking. So I was going to give you a shout out at the end of the show. So I'm glad you already brought up Esper Sentinel. Mm-hmm. I literally was going through our show notes for our set reviews, and you specifically picked Esper Sentinel as the best card in that set.
Yeah, so it was really it's really cool seeing how this, could fit into a deck and just really put a damper on the Phoenix deck. And Shadow Spear also was doing that quite a bit in that matchup. Deck has a lot of answers to the early creatures, and yeah, I thought it was really interesting. It's probably a deck I would sit there and like watch someone play it for like a few matches to like really get the feel for how to play it, because it's not like one of those decks where you're just like dumping out your hand. There was a lot of play to it, and one match I was watching was really interesting because it was kind of neither player had like optimal draws, so it was a long game of Historic. Doesn't seem to happen often.
I'm definitely gonna build this deck because I need a deck like this. But I want to call out some of like the really cool things. I couldn't think of the name of the card, but you made me look this up while you were talking. But like a Moonsnare prototype is like straight up busted. Like like modern playable, legacy playable is like straight up busted. Esper Sentinel, straight up busted. Like, I mean, obviously we've seen its impact on modern stuff like that. And then Thought Monitor, which is the one that has affinity for artifacts. A 1 mana draw 2/2 flyer is straight up busted. I think that there's a lot going on in these decks. I think Nettlecest, I think you mentioned this a little bit, but like between Nettlecest and however many Karns you're playing or however many, like you can just really make huge creatures in your... it's funny to call this an aggro deck, but like it really still is like this aggro synergy deck, right? Which, I mean, if you look through the history of Magic, aggro synergy decks are really good. The other thing that I would call it is like Metallic Rebuke is somehow better than like 90% of the counter spells ever printed when it's good. So I don't know. Any additional thoughts on those?
I think the mana base on this is like super interesting too, right? Like you have the 2 legendary lands from Neon Dynasty in there and the 4 treasure vaults. So this is your lands are doing, you have a lot of lands that are doing something besides just flooding your board with lands, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I am curious. One thing that we don't have to talk about too far. Maybe we'll do another podcast about this if we don't get a guest in the next month. But like, I would love to do a podcast on the legendary lands because I don't think people play enough of them. Like, I think that they, like, the fact that everybody's like playing them as 1-ofs instead of 2-ofs is a little wild to me. And I know the fear. I will say that I personally know that the fear from the balancing team was that they might be too good. They hope that they don't become 4-ofs, and I don't think they're good enough to become 4-ofs. But I do think that we're selling ourselves short for them to be 1-ofs, and we might want to reconsider that.
I think there's a lot of discussion that can be had around that.
Yeah.
I know I'm in Standard. I'm still running into Field of Ruin, so I want to make sure I do have places to go find. I'm playing cards that go and find me basic lands. So that's, from my end, that's like somewhere where I've seen it. But I've noticed those rune decks are like creeping up to 2. So.
Yeah, I know for me, like I posted a list for Tron because I took my team took second only because my former co-host made me leave after a split. We took second at a 3K this weekend for what's called Modern Headhunters, but it's 3 modern decks. You can play any 3. You can play the same 3 modern decks. The format's really cool. And I played Tron, and like one of the interesting things that I learned is like I only played one Boseiju, but like there was no reason for me to play 3 forests instead of 2 Boseijus. Like the second Boseiju, I don't want the second forest anyway. So like the second Boseiju is just a removal spell in Tron. And I think that a lot of those situations are going to show up in formats like Historic. They might not show up in as much in Standard. Like it's possible that you just want one of the legendary lands in Standard. But I think that for Historic, you should try and see. I don't think it's 4-evs, but I think that we're playing too little. Okay. We went off topic a lot, and it's my fault, Mikelea.
We had a long show too, but
you know what? That's what happens when I don't get to talk to you for multiple weeks. I honestly, like, I love doing this show because Michaela's not like one of my normal playtesting partners and not somebody that I talk to like, I mean, we talk like every week, right? But like, it's not like we're texting each other every day, 30 times a day, right? So you and I talk, I don't know, I think we probably text each other like 7 or 8 times this week. And because we're both busy. And so for me doing this show with you is like picking the brain of like a Magic player that I respect. And it's like why I invited you to do the show. And I don't know, like I was never going to load up this Affinity deck, but I might literally try it now because I got to do the show with you. So I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you accommodating me. I really appreciate the listeners for accommodating the fact that I was busy this month. And I'm excited to kind of see like what Mythic means moving forward. I want to quickly say before we wrap up that there is an OP announcement on the 31st, which means that we will record after that announcement. We record on Thursday. Oh, we will record. We might have to change our recording, Mikelea, because we would be recording a full week after it.
We're not recording on the 31st. Oh, no.
Oh, you're right. We would be recording that day. You're right. This is why I have you around, Mikelea. So we will actually be recording the day of the announcement.
I may be going to see Hadestown that night, I think. So we may.
That's gas. We'll figure it out.
I will still find time to record, like, as soon as the announcement. But we need to talk about this.
Yeah, we'll talk about it offline. But yeah. There's a huge announcement coming. I didn't want to do, like, I don't know, like... it was interesting because, like, we recorded this late, right? So we didn't want to do, like, a reaction to the Pro Tour. Like, I just wanted to talk about Historic. The Magic is entering its new era, for what it's worth. Like, we had the biggest modern... cash event outside of we did like a 5K and a 10K here a couple times, but like from a single store that would announce like these 1K pluses, like it was huge. Like Paper Magic starting again. Go ahead.
That people are traveling to events to get out to play right now.
It's true.
New releases have been, maybe not sold out, but they're firing. They're good turnouts. People want to get out and play Paper Magic.
The Standard at Oasis Games where I play, we were having a lot of trouble, and like myself and 2 other people couldn't go this week. It's still fired after with like, so the new rules you could fire with 4 people, right? For like the new rules of like firing a Magic event, but like it would have fired under the old rules plus. And I just want to say that, like, we understand that as the hosts of this podcast. And that's why I think today's episode was a little different, is, like, I think Mikelea and I are both waiting for this announcement, right? Because, like, it's fun to catch the fire, right? Like, hopefully the announcement's awesome. Mikelea and I come in next week, and we're like, yeah, I'm going to...
2 weeks. About 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Thank you. I'm sorry. Next episode. You're calling. See? That's what I'm saying. She's the best. But stay patient, and also like be kind when it comes out, right? Like you have to remember this is the first announcement ever since Huey Jensen took over, and I would allow him and whoever he has on his team to try and make progressive progress towards Like I believe fully that Huey is fighting for us. I hope you do too, Mikelea. And go ahead.
We're living in a different world.
Yeah.
Than our last organized play announcement too. So.
Yeah,
whether that's between like the dismantling of the old system to bring in the MPL to all the changes that went through.
But the last one killed the MPL.
Pandemic, and then we have a pandemic. It changes everything. So, I definitely, again, I think this can make, the thing where like, I'm sure they'll want to hear feedback, right? But also we need to see how it plays out too.
I think
it's funny to see how many people are like nowadays are saying like IQs and PPTQs weren't that bad.
So I will never say that PPTQs weren't that bad.
No, that was not. That's like literally when I dropped out. Like,
PPTQs were the worst. If they're like, we're bringing back PPTQs, I'll be like, I'm not doing that anymore. Like I
don't have the energy to like play an event to play another event to play another event.
Yeah,
that's a lot to ask.
I do want to just say though that I like what you said. Like they're gonna want feedback. However, the number of times that everybody says Magic is dying is not true. And if the pandemic didn't kill Magic, like just let them breathe for a second. Like take it in. I'm hopeful, and I hope that the next time that we talk to you, the listener, that we are presenting you with something really fun and something that gives Mikelea and I the fire. I want Arena to be part of that ecosystem, right? Like, I would like whatever I'm doing on Arena, to push me forward in my goals in Magic. And I hope that you, the listener, do too, right? Like, right now, it doesn't feel like there's a real reason to, like, grind the ladder. And I know that our podcast numbers showed that during the pandemic. We went from, like, this exploding podcast pre-pandemic to, like, why should I listen to a podcast about getting Mythic on Arena? And honestly, like, that's fair. It's totally fair. But what I do think is that in a couple weeks, I think that we'll have something awesome to share with you. So I'm excited about it. You can listen to the rest of the network over at constructorcriticism.com, whether it's common knowledge, constructive criticism, drafting archetypes with Sam Black. There's tons of things for everybody. You can find the show at Arena Mythicast on Twitter, and you can find me at Spencer13H, as well as every other week on Need to Nerd. And I do constructive criticism right now. I don't know if I can stay Mason for much longer, but well, we'll see. What about you, Mikelea?
I'm here.
You're streaming less right now, but you're also really busy right now.
And y'all, like, so I started a new job about 6 months ago now, and like, great work-life balance change for me. Yet somehow I have less time.
I also I think for what it's worth, like our kids are almost the same age for those who don't know. And my son requires so much more of my time now. Like, he just wants me. And like, I'm sure that you and your husband feel the same way. Where like, you're their entire life and like their best friend. And I'm the same way. Like, I know that you've done this too, but like, I started playing more Pokemon with my kid, whether it's like Legends Arceus together or stuff. But it's tough out there. I don't stream anymore either. So I don't blame you for like the decrease, but you're gonna do the show with me. You also have your Discord. Where can people join that?
Yeah, well, I'm Mythic Mikelea everywhere. Type plays only club on Discord because we only make type plays. Never make any loose plays ever.
It's unequivocally false, but I appreciate the effort, right?
Yeah, no, that goes back away. I'm terrible at making good plays when I'm streaming. Like, I will just be sitting there talking and like look over. I'm like, clicked the wrong card. Didn't read the card.
If you find me a good streamer, like and a good Magic player at the same time. I'm not saying a good Magic player who streams or a good streamer who plays Magic. I want to know somebody who's like talks about their plays as they're making them, talking and interacting with chat, like doing all the things a good streamer does while also playing Magic. They're the best Magic player in the world. Like, and they also have a computer for a brain.
Yeah, but honestly, like I just any of the multitasking and playing Magic is just bad. It's just bad.
Like, so, oh, go ahead.
That's a whole nother conversation again. Like the whole like trying to play Magic tournaments from home and like there being distractions and like sitting down at a tournament across from an opponent, I can like sit there and focus. Heck, if I'm sitting at a computer across from a tournament, I can actually sit there and focus. Home, it's gone. It's just gone. So, anyways, yeah, I'm Mythic Mikelea everywhere since we derailed that conversation.
That's okay.
Don't multitask and play Magic. It's this week's advice. Or do. Just know. Just know what happens.
Just know that will happen. You can like, sub, and review the show everywhere, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you are. It would really mean a lot to us. Don't forget to check out our sponsor or our Patreon. I try to say those words at the same time. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you for forgiving me for missing a week. I'm excited to... I didn't realize we were recording that Thursday or, around that day. That's really cool for me. I'm now really excited and hesitant for the next episode of Mythicast. Mikelea, thank you so much for your time. I know that your son probably wants you to smash a hammer on some creature's head in Paper Mario. So thank you. And we'll see you all next week with another episode of Mythicast. Well, not next week. That's going to be hard for me, for what it's worth, listeners.